Today's video title is not sensationalist access. It reflects the recent intensive coverage by major official media outlets on a pressing issue that has already become a fact. The topic of our discussion is one that is no longer breaking news, the phenomenon of student drought. A realist for this discussion was a report by Canixon, which highlighted that amidst the continuous record high number of college entrance examination registrants, surpassing 130 million for the first time this year, a contrasting trend has emerged in the northeastern provinces, where more than half of the primary schools have been closed over the past decade. This indicates that a silent spread of student drought daily is occurring during the compulsory education state. Starting from this year, it is estimated that in more than half of the country's districts and counties, the school-age population in compulsory education will decline. Following the wave of kindergarten closures, the impact of a declining birth rate has begun to extend to primary and junior high schools. Let's address a question: why did the student drought start in the Northeast? It's because the region has three significant characteristics: states a low population base, a low birth rate, and a high outflow rate. We can look at a few sets of data to understand the specifics. And according to the 7th National Population Census data, the population in the Northeast region accounts for only 6.98% of the total national population, which is relatively low nationwide. Furthermore, people in the Northeast are not prolific in terms of childbirth series. The birth rate in the Northeast is significantly lower than the national average. In 2021, the birth rate in the Northeast was 4.35 per thousand, with the number of births dropping to 423,000, less than half of what it was in 2000. By 2023, the birth rates in Heilongshire, Kilauea, Jilin, and Tilin were only 3.3, 4.33, and 4.06 per thousand, respectively, far below the national average of 6.393 per thousand. The severe population outflow in the Northeast has long been a consensus. Between 2010 and 2020, the population in the Northeast decreased by 11 million, a drop of 10.04%, with a net outflow of 10.854 million, accounting for 98.68% of the population reduction. From 2015 to 2019, the total resident population in the three northeastern provinces decreased by 1.824 million. Consequently, we are witnessing more profound impact. Between 2013 and 2020, more than half of the primary schools in the three northeastern provinces were closed, with Heilongshire alone seeing the disappearance of over 1,900 primary schools, nearly 60% of the total. Jilin closed over 2,600 schools, more than 50% of the total, and Liaoning also closed nearly 2,200 schools, reducing its scale by nearly half of the total. Looking at these figures, one can only say that the Northeast provides the most typical picture of a student drought. Of course, the student drought is not limited to the Northeast region. News reports from places like Shuizhou in Shaanxi and Quanzhou in Fujian also indicate an increasing number of primary school closures. Nationally in 2023, the exact number of closed primary schools was 5,645, up from 5,162 in 2022. The emergence of the primary school student drought is undoubtedly a continuation of the kindergarten closures in the era of a declining birth rate. Some may argue, saying that they don't see primary schools closing around them, despite the constant talk of a closure wave. This is a case of survivor bias. Most internet users who pay attention to these issues are from big cities, while in reality, it is the rural and suburban private schools that are the first to close down. The former is due to urbanization, with students mainly concentrating in county towns and provincial capitals, leading to a reduction in the scale and dispersion of rural students. The latter operates on a self-financing basis, without financial allocations from the government, and thus highly relies on tuition fees, which ordinary families are increasingly unable to afford. In fact, if we observe closely, we will find that many kindergartens and primary schools in big cities are still hard to get into. For example, when we talk about the closure wave hitting schools in Shaanxi and the Northeast, little do we know that in places like Beijing, Guangzhou, and Hangaishu, this year has seen the most difficult primary school entrance year. In previous videos, we have discussed the fact that kindergartens across the country are closing on a large scale. From the data, in just 1 year, the number of children in kindergartens decreased by 5,345,000, corresponding to a reduction of 14,800 kindergarten. It is worth mentioning that the 3 northeastern provinces which share population outflow also saw the earliest reduction in the number of kindergarten. The wave of kindergarten closures is far higher than that of primary schools. The main culprit is, of course, the continuous decline in newborns, leading to a nursery shortage. Statistical data show that in 2023, the national newborn population was 9,020,000, falling below 10 million for 2 consecutive years, almost halving compared to the peak in 2016. In Guangzhou and Shandong, we are even starting to see many kindergartens planning to transform recruiting older children when they can't attract younger ones. A kindergarten in Hadu, Guangzhou has perfectly transformed into a university for the elderly, offering courses such as tea art, chess, and health preservation. In contrast, let's look at the situation in Japan. Japan's population negative growth began in 1950. But the significant reduction in the number of kindergartens was delayed until 1986, with side effects appearing 36 years later. Why didn't the number of kindergartens in Japan decrease significantly with the population? The root cause is that Japanese kindergartens adjusted the number of admission quotas, and some remote kindergartens, even with few people, persisted. This year, we have noticed a trend towards smaller class sizes in some of our local kindergarten. Previously, it was a configuration of 35 children per class. But this year, many kindergartens can start class with 25 children. The impact of a declining birth rate is obvious as first. Family structures are becoming smaller, with the average number of people per household in our country having significantly decreased over the years, from nearly 4 per household in 1990 to 3.09 in 2010, and further down to 2.62 in 2023. Second, the family structure has shifted from traditional multi-generational households to nuclear families, with the proportion of family households composed of spouses and their unmarried children increasing. At the same time, single households and extended families have also become part of the family structure. Additionally, the phenomenon of daily chatu education, employment or training 7, which is easy to explain. In the era of a declining birth rate and an aging population, family relationships have shifted from prioritizing the elderly and children to focusing on children. This new pattern exacerbates the injustice in the distribution of resources between generations. To put it bluntly, as social pressures intensify and the job market for young people becomes extremely severe, it has become increasingly common for middle-aged and elderly people to use their pensions to subsidize the younger generation. The emergence of a student drought in primary schools has significant impacts on various industries. The first is the education sector. Since 2017, the national birth population has decreased by 1 to 2 million each year, compared to the previous year. As the student drought intensifies, the number of enrollees in kindergartens and primary schools is reducing, potentially threatening junior high schools in 6 years, high schools in 9 years, and universities in 12 years. The focus has been on the fact that China's birth population has decreased for 7 consecutive years since 2017. But more alarmingly, the willingness of young people to marry and have children continues to decline. This indicates that the birth population may continue to decrease for a long time in the future. China's standards for the construction of junior and senior high schools were set more than a decade ago, which means that if no measures are taken now, a large number of these schools and even ordinary colleges will face bankruptcy crises in the future, especially rural schools, vocational schools, and private schools. The recruitment will become even more challenging. Freedom is often forced by reality, so I believe that the current moment is an important opportunity to optimize and adjust the educational structure. In conjunction with the 24 million college graduates seeking employment, mentioned in the previous video, reform in the education sector should not only consider small class teaching, high-quality teaching, and the adaptation of educational infrastructure, but also focus on aligning with market demand. To be frank, the future establishment of university courses should focus on matching the skill levels of college students with job skill demands, rather than indiscriminately offering various miscellaneous and useless majors just to delay employment. After graduating from university and entering the job market, many are at a loss. The current college graduation season is also a record of countless young people bravely embracing a slow path to employment, a phenomenon known as daily lying flat core. I have always believed that if we are determined to upgrade technology, we should focus on developing science, technology, engineering, and mathematics-based STEM months fields and vocational education. We must abandon the exam-centric tiger parenting hold of teaching and reshape the entire education system in a short period. If we continue with the previous education system, it will be difficult to change the embarrassing situation where university graduates cannot find decent jobs. The second industry is the teaching profession. According to scholars' predictions based on birth population models, by 2035, there will be in excess of about 1.5 million primary school teachers and 370,000 junior high school teachers nationwide. The future of teaching positions is also of great concern because given the current student-teacher ratio, the situation of teacher surplus in the future will be extremely exaggerated. As I mentioned earlier, the current solution being tried is small class teaching and reducing the class size in kindergartens to increase the ratio of full-time teachers to children from 1 to 15 to 1 to 10 or even higher, reducing the kindergarten class size to below 20 children. In this way, kindergartens will not face large-scale closures, and there will be no surplus of kindergarten teachers. The third industry is the real estate sector. The most direct impact of a low birth rate is the continuous annual decrease in the demand for houses. Once extremely strong in demand, school district houses can no longer withstand the downward expectation of the population and have begun to undergo deep adjustment. Taking Beijing as an example, old and dilapidated school district houses have been rapidly decreasing in value in recent years, with significant price drops in Haidian, with some school district houses falling by 30% or even 40% or more. In the decade before 2023, the economic school-age population more than tripled, but in the past 2 years, it has turned downward. This year's number is 20,000 less than last year and nearly 50,000 less than the peak in 2021. The second industry is manufacturing. The employment concepts of young people nowadays are completely different from those of the previous 2 generations' access-aided service industry. The working hours in manufacturing are fixed. The management system is strict and the working environment is relatively poor. This has led to difficulties in recruiting and labor shortages in the manufacturing industry. It must be admitted that there is still a bias against labor-intensive industries in today's society. Young people would rather deliver food than work in factories, which is also the source of Teodon's worries. If all young people deliver food, what will happen to the manufacturing industry? Now, young people have turned the triathlon into a knowledge-intensive industry. In just the food delivery industry, the proportion of college students has exceeded 30%. The last industries are maternal and child services and those related to children. The decrease in the number of infants and primary school students will inevitably have a chain impact on the maternal and child service industry because it will lead to a decrease in related demands, including but not limited to milk powder, diapers, children's clothing toys, children's entertainment facilities, early education and interest classes. These industries heavily rely on the number of children of the right age. The lack of students in kindergartens and primary schools will affect the source of students for interest classes, and against the backdrop of consumption downgrade. Many parents have changed their choices for interest classes. Piano and dance training are the first to be cut. From a personal standpoint, the decline in the birth population and the reduction of infants and primary school students have, to some extent, reduced the internal competition. The most obvious change is that the competitiveness of kindergarten and primary school entrance has decreased. As the impact extends to high schools and universities, perhaps the current brutal division of middle school exams and the selection of college entrance exams will also be canceled. So it's not that this is not a good thing. However, considering the overall situation, the decline in the birth population and the emergence of student drought will lead to the idleness of educational infrastructure built on a large scale in previous years and may cause a serious surplus of educators. Moreover, these issues will become more and more severe over time. Fortunately, all regions have finally started to pay attention to the fertility issue. From the current measures introduced, giving money seems to be the main event to encourage fertility. In the past 2 years, many regions have given cash rewards to families with 2 or 3 children. Hefei offers a reward of 2,000 yuan for the second child and 5,000 yuan for the third child. In Shangrao County, Jiangxi families with 2 or 3 children are given one-time rewards of 7,000 yuan and 13,000 yuan respectively. Earlier, Dayu County Ganzhou, Jiangxi offered a one-time reward of 20,000 yuan for families having a third child starting this year. The most ruthless is Huaxiang Township, Yaixang City, Hubei Province, where villagers who have a second or third child legally will be rewarded with 20,000 yuan, 50,000 yuan, respectively. You may have noticed that most of the regions that encourage fertility by giving money are remote county-level areas. This is actually understandable. On the one hand, these areas have a serious population outflow, and on the other hand, this scale of money encouragement for fertility is probably not welcome in big cities, but it can make waves in small counties. Although compared with the high cost of raising a child, this reward is just a drop in the bucket. I think it's a good signal because it's no longer just verbal support by issuing documents and coupons. Moreover, the money given is an extra benefit for families that have a second or third child. Not long ago, the China Population and Development Research Center conducted a sample survey of 30,000 people, claiming to fully analyze the reasons why people don't want to have children and dare not to have children. I want to say that we all know where the root of the low fertility rate is. Such surveys are often difficult to touch the root, but starting to act is also the first step to face the problem. However, we also have to admit that starting to act and reversing the trend are 2 different things. From the fertility history of Japan and South Korea, it is difficult to change the overall trend in the short term, even if we heavily reward fertility. Not to mention that we can't spend a lot of money. It's the same with houses. The more we want to stimulate young people to enter the market, the more the effect is the opposite. The root is that young people have awakened. The words often mentioned by young people now are that I can't even support myself. How can I raise a child? Finally, let's imagine, in China, what other practical measures can make people have more children. I think we don't need a big reform, just strictly implement the labor law to protect the rights and interests of workers, which can not only increase employment but also effectively curb internal competition. When the luxury of working 5 days a week for 8 hours a day becomes a reality, more people will have money and time to consider marriage and childbirth, right? If we can't even do this, what else can we talk about? Various welfare guarantees